so much for tuning into Sin's Workshop. I hope we're all having a wonderful day. Okay, so today we are going to be reviewing Alchemy of Secrets. I recently just finished this book. It was my book club pick for February for Read with Sin's Workshop, my virtual book club. It was interesting. I'm still not sure how I feel about it, to be perfectly honest with you. Holland is definitely an unreliable narrator for sure, you know, but I think I love Once Upon a Broken Heart. I have not read Caraval, and my problem with authors is I don't like reading some of their previous stuff because writing styles change, right? Writing styles change a lot, so I feel like I'm not gonna love Caraval as much as I love Once Upon a Broken Heart. And I don't want to ruin that feel. Maybe I'll audiobook it, but this is her adult debut. And I will say I'm very thankful that she did not fall into the trap that most young adults who transition to fantasy writers did. She didn't fill her book with a whole ton of unnecessary smut, right? I don't mind smut. It's not what I go looking for when I read a book. No shame to people who do. My best friend in the entire world, she reads smut. To each their own. It's just not something I gravitate towards, right? So I'm glad that Stephanie did not fall into that trap. And I'm really glad because oftentimes it takes away from the story and it takes away from the plot. Now, I think my biggest struggle with this book is it feels very unresolved. I don't know if this is the first in the series. I think it is. I'm not 100% sure. But it feels very, very unresolved. You know, Stephanie Garber just kind of launches you into the story. And it is a fast-paced story. It is non-stop, relentless from beginning to end. So it's a really, really, really quick read, you know? It is a very quick read, and I appreciate that. However, there's not a whole lot of time to breathe. Those breathing moments you get are from Folklore 517 inserts, right, that break up the pacing of the book, and they're really, really interesting. They add to the mystique of the story, and I really, really enjoy those aspects of the story more than the actual plot, because they tie into whatever Holland is doing at the moment. So there is some level of history there, some mystery that lends to the pacing of the plot, right? And those are the only moments that you get to really breathe when you're reading this book. Because it's a whirlwind. Like, it is a fucking whirlwind. I mean, it is just... Sorry, knives are like my fidget spinner. It's just so fast-paced, right? And I struggled to connect to Holland a lot. She's very much an unreliable narrator. There were times, you know, she keeps mentioning her sister. I'm like, does her sister even exist at this point? Or is she just living a double life? Or does she have multiple personalities? You know, that's where my mind went. Is she two people, right? And also, there's no one she can trust. So she was very much an unreliable narrator, and sometimes her decisions, I understood why she made the decisions, because everyone around her has some sort of secret identity and secret. They're all kind of clamoring around her because they think she's the key to finding the alchemical heart, right? And she is. They're not wrong. But it feels like everyone knew this and ingratiated themselves in her life before she knew this, right? So I was just like, okay, what did they know that they didn't know? You know, and it all connects to her father, who was a screenwriter, his missing screenplay, and their mysterious death, right? It's just very... You have Gabe, he's like, I was sent by your sister to protect you. And then you have Alex, he's like, I'm your sister's partner. I was sent here to protect her. Don't trust him. Don't trust him. And they're both pointing at each other, and she's like, you've seen Scream, right? It's the first Scream, where it's Randy and Stu, and they're like pointing at each other, and she's just like, well, fuck you both, right? And she goes into the house with the gun. That's what that reminded me of. That is exactly what that reminded me of, where she's like, well, fuck you both. And, you know, you kind of like get it. But her decisions don't always feel like smart decisions to me either, you know? She's a grad student, but she also seems very, very immature. I was really confused, like, okay, is she a grad student or is she a high school student? Because she seemed sometimes like a high school student and not like a grad student who's already made all her stupid decisions in life, right? Not just saying, like, as we get older, we stop making stupid decisions. We certainly do not. But it just felt there was a disconnect between me and Holland, you know, and I think that really does connect to her being an unreliable narrator. I was really unsure of her maturity level at the time. She seemed... I love Evangeline, you know? And even sometimes Evangeline made questionable decisions because, again, she didn't know who she could trust in Once Upon a Broken Heart. But you at least knew who Evangeline was. You don't really know who Holland is. Like, you know who she is, but a lot of her motivations, a lot of her personality just kind of fall flat. You know, there was a disconnect between me and this character because I was unsure, like, okay, is she supposed to be a grad student? She seems like a high school idiot. I say that because I was a high school idiot. I was really, really unsure about her as a character. And then, you know, you have Gabe, and his storyline is very much unresolved. You have Alex's storyline is very much unresolved by the end. Everyone around her has some sort of secret identity, even her professor, and then you have the magical bank. There's a lot that's unresolved by the ending of this book, and to me, that just made me it made me feel very unfulfilled when I was reading this book. I wanted a more fulfilling ending. So I'm a little disappointed that I didn't get that kind of ending from this book. I wanted some sort of really good, solid resolution. Does she get the alchemical heart? Yes. Does she use it? Yes. You know, but what about all the other little story points that are introduced as the plot goes along? You know, none of that is fully resolved by the time you get to the end. I do think that the novel taking place over a day, you know, because if she doesn't get the alchemical heart, she's going to die. So there's a time crunch, which also adds to the pacing of the book. So you are kind of hooked. You are hooked in the mystery. You are hooked in the intrigue. You are hooked, like, is she going to get the alchemical heart kind of thing. There is a lot of rising tension that grips you, and I think the pacing works to grip you as well. I just wanted more from it, and I wanted a stronger ending, and I wanted a little bit more from Holland. I wanted a little more definition on her character itself, because that's my biggest struggle with this book. You know, the unresolved ending, and then my struggle to connect to Holland as a character. I quite like unreliable narrators. It's very rare that you get to see an unreliable narrator done nowadays, because they are challenging to write. You know, they are challenging characters to write. As someone who has attempted and failed at doing it, don't even get me started. But I feel like I really couldn't connect to her because she was so unreliable that I'm like, okay, what is fiction and what is fact for you? How old are you? You're acting super immature for your age. That didn't lead any credence to her. Credence? You know what I'm saying. So it was a struggle to connect to her, honestly. But it was a really fast-paced book. I liked the mystery. I liked the fantasy aspect of the book. It was very much an urban fantasy kind of story, which is really, really cool. It's very different from her previous books. Very, very different. And I appreciate that. And I also appreciate that Stephanie Garber didn't fall into the trap of, I'm going to make everything smut. There's a lot going for this book. It is really, really intriguing. It just was on a 4-star book for me. 3.5. It was a 3.5 book. 3.5-star book for me. It was good, but I didn't love it. I wish there had been more solidarity around the characterization for Holland, honestly. But there's a lot of good plot twist. There's a lot of good rising tension. I do like the pace. I do like those folklore 517 inserts that break up the pacing. So it does have a lot of promising aspects for the book. It's really just that characterization that kind of like, I was disconnect that really hindered me loving the book. So ultimately 3.5 out of 5 stars. Solid book, but I think it just needed a little bit more definition. But in any case, thank you all for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with our book with your friends. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, happy reading.